This show is dedicated once again to a big, gruff teddy bear of a person, Mr. Ross Mack. I'm celebrating his life a year later because he possessed a bigger-than-life passion for his family with an endless dedication to all students, no matter how they learned. And I am celebrating his ability to embrace and empower all those lucky enough to be called friends. Ross Mack was my friend.
This is Vanessa Angelica Villarreal, and I'll be reading I Was a Good Wife. I was a good wife, and an even better wolf, jawed to a thicket of lonely lungs, trees I mean, breathing, comet come to me, come a lone light, like the fire that rips the mountainside's dress. I was a good ununderstood, a wrist of bent light, undressing alone and even quieter violence. I am remembering how to want my life, how to want to come even closer to the wolf I was. You wanted this to be about borders? It is. About this poem. The Good Immigrant doesn't just describe the conditional value of a person's labor to the state. It is also a gendered, intimate role, played out in intimate contexts. The daughters of good immigrants are taught to love like good immigrants, to be obedient, deferential, respectable, self-sacrificing, with a high tolerance for disrespect in exchange for a partner or a country that does not want you. To be a good immigrant, a good worker, a good student, a good wife, is to begin every relationship from a disempowered position, sentenced to cycles of generational trauma through patterns of attraction that mirror immigrant striving. To love someone who cannot love you, to prove one's worth through labor, to conflate labor with love and love with safety, to find that even documents of permanence come with no guarantees.
Hello, welcome back to the Lo-Fi Lounge. I'm CHRIS Leroy. This is season 2. This week we're talking about Doug Gillette and the incredible Gillette's music, his centerpiece of music in the Inland Empire. I even bought this album in Gillette's when it was in Riverside. Louis Armstrong and his Hot 5. I also wanted to announce an upcoming show, The Eyelids, with Victor Krummenacher's Flying Circus, are coming to the Lo-Fi Lounge, are coming to the Lo-Fi Studio Saturday, November 6th in Redlands, California. And tickets will be available really, really quick, so I don't want to give you a quick update. But thanks for coming to the lounge and staying with the lounge. Let's rock again.
The name Doug Gillette is one that should be familiar to Inland Empire music lovers that were teenagers in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s. As far as I know, Doug Gillette was never proficient on any musical instrument. but there was no doubting his love of music. Because of that, Gillette's record stores were an important destination for Inland Empire musicians from the mid-1950s to the mid-1980s. Gillette would not only carry the hits of the day, he would also stock releases by IE bands, giving them exposure that was hard to come by. His store was also the go-to place to buy tickets for the classic concerts at the Swing Auditorium in San Bernardino. He was perhaps the first dealer in the IE to carry English import 45s and LPs. By doing so, he exposed locals to British invasion music not yet released by American record companies. When he opened his first store in Colton, California, he noted that the city had a growing Spanish-speaking population. To serve this often ignored demographic, he carried releases from the Peerless Discos label, which he imported from Mexico. 1911 was the year that life began for Doug Gillette. He grew up in Central Village, Connecticut. All signs indicate that he had an idyllic childhood in the Northeast. As a teenager, he attended prep school and made a name for himself as an athlete. He particularly impressed all with his abilities as a baseball pitcher. Gillette showed so much potential that in 1932, the National League's St. Louis Cardinals baseball team signed him to a minor league contract. His first season was spent in the Nebraska State League with the Grand Island Islanders. The rookie won 16 games and lost 8. He pitched for 3 seasons in the minors before blowing out his arm and retiring from the game in 1935. But this was not to be the end of Gillette's pitching career. When World War II reared its ugly head, he joined the U.S. Army and was stationed in England. But it wasn't long before his pitching prowess was discovered by the brass. Gillette became a member of the 116th Infantry Regiment Yankees baseball team. When the European Theater held a baseball championship series in 1943, the underrated team surprised everyone and won the tournament, with Gillette pitching the team to victory in the final game. At the conclusion of the war, he moved to Pembroke, Massachusetts. Not much more is known about his post-war years, but by the mid-1950s, he had opened up a record store in the Inland Empire. While located in downtown Colton, Gillette yearly advertised his store in the Colton High School annuals to connect with the young students that would become his clientele. In Gillette's Colton stores, and later in his Riverside Brockton Arcade store, he had more than just listening booths. He had sizable listening rooms featuring a pair of vintage 1950s-era Altec Lansing Voice of the Theater speakers. The top photo is from the 1950s, and the bottom photo from the 1960s. Gillette's aim was to make his store as teenage-friendly as he could, and fill his store with potential customers. In addition to carrying the middle-of-the-road record releases, he also stocked the rock and roll, rhythm and blues hits of the day. Many Colton High students chose to make Gillette's record store as much of an after-school destination as the corner malt shop. When a customer would purchase a 45 single, Gillette would make sure to apply a sticker to remind the buyer where the record was purchased. He did this at both his Colton and Riverside stores. In 1960, Doug Gillette decided to move his record store from his downtown location to Colton's new Mount Vernon shopping center. Like many other downtown merchants, he probably saw this as the future of retail in Colton. To announce the move, in the 1960 Colton High School annual, he ran this ad, which would probably be considered controversial today. It featured 11 girls pulling a trailer of 5 boys, representing Gillette's. 2 of the boys were using whips to encourage the girls to pull them up the hill to the Mount Vernon shopping center. The setup for Gillette's new store in the Mount Vernon shopping center was similar to his old downtown location, except that he now had more room for his stock. However, by 1963, he once again decided to pull up stakes, and he moved his record store to new IE locations. More on Gillette's move from Colton to new locations in Part 2.
Exterminating Angel, there's the film.
That Buñuel film, right?
Buñuel film. So was that a little bit like the dinner you couldn't leave?
But yeah, that's good. That's funny because that was a couple of the song titles on the record were actually Immergluck suggestions. Completely removed. I forgot about that. Three Kings, and Exterminating Angel. Those were songs that he titled. And I had just seen that movie recently. He told me about it. He's a big foreign movie buff. I'm a big foreign movie buff, and he told me about it. He's like, "Oh, you haven't seen it? You got to check this out. It's like it's a classic." So I saw it, and I'm like, "It's yours."
Sunday morning, Record Square, I found the worn out edges of an old affair. Across the cover where your head would gather to the side when you were sleeping there. Maybe you were sleeping, waiting to came a song, I was there. Came a song, came a song. Turn the cardboard front to back. Remember every picture and every lie. How you bought it for yourself. When you left, decided it was mine. Maybe you were a child, with no place to begin. Came a song that set me reeling. Came a song, I was there. Came a song, came a song. Let it spin. Sunday morning, Record Square, I walked their worn out edges of an old affair. I lost that album long ago. Sometimes songs will take you where you would go. Looking close, a tiny message where you squeezed it in. Came a song, set me reeling. Came a song, did me in. Came a song, came a song. Came a song that set me reeling. Came a song that did me in. Came a song, came
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Brown Box. I'm your co-host, Brian Harsh.
And I'm CHRIS Leroy.
And on Brown Box, we each bring in a different record that we really enjoy and that we want to kind of hype and talk about and maybe expose some people to. So that's what we're going to be doing today.
I like that concept.
Absolutely.
And we also have a brown box. It's symbolic.
It looks a little familiar, but, it's a lot of things. So let's go in the box. You want to go with what my selection is first?
Let's see.
All right. So I
dare
brought,
you. Uh-oh.
Yes. Uh-oh is right. So I brought Captain Beefheart and his magic band and a little something called TROUT Mask Replica. So let me tell you. So, I didn't always have I found this when I was I think it was 16. So it's kind of nice later on in life when you become an older record collector. You can go back to some of these things that you really, maybe got on CD at the time, and then you can, bring them back into your life. This particular one, I remember I had moved to Redlands, and I was starting 11th grade. And you know how it is when you just start, you move to somewhere new, and you're in a brand new environment, and it's not always something, not everyone knows you, but they've all known each other for years.
Yeah.
And so, so I had a class assignment for English. And it was like we had to make a visual or auditory, I forgot the exact specifics, but we had to make some kind of a visual or auditory representation of something we read.
Okay.
So, I had a lot of music at home. So I went home and I made a tape, pretty much like, when the Beatles would make the abstract compositions and they'd string stuff together.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So I recorded the end of Strawberry Fields, and I recorded nature sounds, and I kind of made it on a loop on a tape.
Wow. And
I had them playing while I was telling a narrative. And if you didn't think I had any friends when I moved to Redlands for the first time, watch what happened after I played that tape, because I don't think anyone wanted to come near me, right? But the next day, somebody in that class came up to me and he handed me a stack of CDs, and he said, "You got to listen to these."
Wow.
Yesterday, because it was just kind of
breakthrough.
So I mean, I'm not gonna get into all of what he gave me, because honestly, all of those were super formative to going forward and what I would listen to from then on. Wow. It was just all of them. So I don't want to talk about all of them, but this was one of them. Wow. And so, the story is with this album is Captain Beefheart recorded this in late '68, released it in 1969. He was a childhood friends of Frank Zappa. So they grew up together, obviously. This was produced by Zappa. But produced is very loosely used here, because this band had recorded the album for about 9 months straight, while more or less he was keeping them captive in a house. And so, I mean, there's a whole story to this that we can definitely get into. We will not. Just know that it's the first time I listened to it, I didn't really like it. It was very and anyone who listens to it for the first time, it's going to be very hard for you to digest it. Because there's a lot going on. Everyone's playing a different time signature. There's different types of music, basically clashing against each other. So you have blues, you have free jazz, you have rock. Just this big melting pot of things happening all at the same time. And then you have this guy, singing over it. When they recorded it, he was singing over tracks that were leaking through the sound booth.
Yeah.
He didn't like earphones, because apparently he had an incident where he put an earphone on in a studio, and he had some big squall of feedback, and it almost blew out his eardrum. So he did not
Was that a lo-fi studio?
Yeah, probably, right? Yeah, could have been. Maria, hello. So anyway, from then on, so he would just listen to the bleed through from the control room of the music and attempt to sing over it. And attempt to play, he had someone playing clarinet, but attempt to play a saxophone, which he wasn't a sax player.
No.
But anyway, it's 2 LPs. It's 80 minutes, 20 something songs. Now, the more I listen to it, it just became one of my favorite records, just because it is so out there and it's so different, and no one has done anything like it since. And they probably never will. And some people are still trying to maybe figure out what it is. What's your relationship with it, if you have one at all?
Oh no, it was sort of similar. I mean, I certainly knew about Frank Zappa and then about Captain Beefheart through that, I knew that they were compatriots. Maybe it heard Safe as Milk or something before, where there's a little more form, a little bluesier. But there's a book called Stranded. I think you like Stranded on a Desert Island.
Right.
And the different authors. I think Girl Marcus edited it. And people pick like the album they would be on their desert island disc. And that was the only album they could have. And so some of the things make sense, but the best essay in the whole thing is the person who chooses this album. And the reasons they have, it says, well, it's a double album. And there's lots of songs. And so you'll have a lot of time on your hands. And you could, sort through these songs and have ongoing greatest hits or, what's the top of the pops. And you just go through all these different things. It's a music that grows on you.
It does.
And
like a fungus.
It certainly does. And I would listen to, back then, I would listen to music for an extended time. I have it on my little vinyl machine there and would listen to it. And I would always just go back and just start again when I would be writing and thinking. And this and probably Jimi Hendrix, Are You Experienced album, the two pieces of music that I listened to the most.
Wow.
Jimi Hendrix being an obvious choice.
Right.
This being the less obvious choice because I was surprised that I got into it so deeply and could start, singing along with him and started getting these stories, and you realize he has this dense poetry.
Yes, that's what it is.
And it is actually solvable, and you start to hear these stories emerge, and there's a great beauty in his language.
There is.
And what would seem like a cacophony of sound ends up making sense, just like you make sense of the words, you start to make sense of this sound, and it just sounds like a normal album to me.
And there's a clip on YouTube of Matt Groening, the creator of The Simpsons. And it's about a minute long, but he talks about this album. And his experience is the same as everyone else's. Like, you get it and you don't like it at first. But he says what did it for him is when he started to understand that they were playing this way on purpose. Like and these guys were not bad musicians.
No,
I mean, they were like, even like your free jazz artists, like people think they are just playing bad. They are all like highly trained. Yeah. So it's definitely a discipline. But yeah, I mean, what he said in that clip really it just said, it makes complete sense because they are playing that way on purpose. They're highly disciplined, and they're meaning it to sound that way. And then they're also breaking these barriers through what they're doing.
It's a very free music, and in some ways, if you haven't listened to jazz music, you say here's a whole genre of stuff that you somehow just not come into your life. At the beginning, it seems a little formless, or it seems like, and even though there's intense form, you go back all the way to Louis Armstrong, these are songs with form. But even Louis Armstrong had this freedom to jump through that music, and he would play rhythmically something so challenging up in that music. And sometimes I listen to Louis Armstrong and hear how he's cutting across this music in this very, very free thing. I go, this is the same as Anthony Braxton. Yeah. This is the same as all these free players.
Coleman. Yeah.
This is the same as that.
Right.
That there's a language that's cutting through. There's a sound of music, and there's these pathways in this music. It's just a fantastic album.
Yeah.
And again, it's one of these things you like. For the students who saw you when you were doing that presentation, if you had handed out an album to each one of those people, still it'd only be that one guy that would come back and bring you the CD.
And I don't even know who that guy is. You know what I mean? It's like he could have been. He just walk on the set and then it's like he's gone. You know?
Really?
But no, I think I don't talk to him to this day, but I know he went on to an Ivy League school. He's very, very intelligent. But the music he gave me was like, I could draw a line between that day and everything that came before it, and then everything that came after, and it kind of what I listened to.
Yeah.
And this for sure. If you were to listen to this for the first time, probably recommend. It's great that it's 4 sides, or if you can listen to it on a record, please do.
Yes.
Because it's best to listen to maybe just as pieces if you're just starting out. If you have a party at your house and you want to get rid of everybody, you could definitely put this on too. That'll work in both instances. Then you can just stay and listen to it and enjoy it.
Along that line.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not to clear the house, but it's another kind of like the Dylan book that we talked about earlier.
Right.
Is a great compendium or a great partner for the basement tapes. There's a wonderful 33 1/3
Yes.
book. It's a very, very personal take
Mm-hmm.
about this album. And it kind of follows the same pattern,
Yeah.
and it's very interesting the way he inherits the first version of that album.
Yes.
But that's another. That would be another guide. If you
Mhm.
were going to have a neat guide through this album, that would be a great book.
It's essential.
Yeah, to look through and just see how other people have experienced it, because it's one of the best albums ever made.
I think it is.
And
You may call me crazy for saying that.
You may
know,
be
but,
crazy.
Hey,
that makes two of
Yeah,
us. But
yeah,
it's
right.
it's one of my favorite albums.
excellent. I'm glad you like it too.
Yeah. Hey folks, thanks for hanging out at the Lo-Fi Lounge. We'll see you all next week. Wait, we got one more thing.